You may have heard of the term healthspan. It means how long you live in a healthy state without chronic disease. And I talked about it in my interview with Bryce Wild not too long ago. And I also talked about it in my interview today with my guest, who's a gerontologist. And she looks at how we age from the time we're born to the time we're in our senior years. And what can we do that we can help ourselves age in a way that will prolong our health span? We also talked about our aging parents and how difficult it can be for us Gen Xers to see our parents get older. And I did an amazing interview with my mother. We had a very candid, open conversation about it. And I'll put a link to that below, how difficult it could be to watch our parents age. So that was a part of the conversation today that I think might resonate with a lot of you. We also talked about ways that you could hack your health span. And she gave two great free tips that you could do on a regular basis that will help with helping to relax you, but also helping to build muscle strength, which is so important for us as we go into perimenopause and menopause. So before I introduce my guest today, I'd like to take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Andrea Donsky. I'm a nutritionist for almost 20 years. I'm a menopause educator and very soon to be published menopause researcher, as 4 abstracts of our survey research will be published in the journal Menopause in December. So I'm very excited about that. If you haven't filled out our survey research, please take a moment to do so. I put links to it below. I put actually one link that will take you to all the surveys. We have 11 of them right now that you could fill out. Our newest one is called Doctor Insights, and it's a continuation to our doctor's visit survey, which was the most engaged survey to date. So I would be super grateful if you could take a minute to fill them out to help further menopause research. Also, if you're looking for solutions to help manage your symptoms now that you're in perimenopause and menopause, please check out our Morphus supplements. All of them are backed by research, they're third-party tested, and they work. I take them, I take a lot of them. My partner Randy takes a lot of them, as do our friends and family. So these are supplements that I spent years, ingredients that I spent years researching that I know are beneficial for women in perimenopause and menopause. So I put a link to those below. You can also find them at on my website under shop. Today I'm speaking with Zora Benamou. She's a gerontologist and biohacker dedicated to challenging menopause stigma and ageist stereotypes. As the host of the Hack My Age podcast, she focuses on empowering women navigating the menopausal transition through biohacking techniques. Now, here's Zora. Welcome to Menopause Reimagined, Zora.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to have you, and I love that we were introduced by a mutual friend, and I love what you're doing in the menopause space. I love that you're a gerontologist, so I thought it would be a really good place to start with, like, what is a gerontologist? What do you do? And then I want to talk about biohacking.
Yes, the two words that nobody really is familiar with. I've chosen to, follow my career path in that. So gerontology is not a geriatric physician, which a lot of people think. I'm not a doctor. Gerontologist is someone who studies longevity and aging, but not only from the biological perspective, but from a psychological and a sociological perspective as well. And we look at the whole life course from birth to death, not just older adults. And although we do have a focus on older adults, we advocate for them. We try to have, there's social policy changes we do, and it's a lot of things that encompass a gerontologist. So it's not just the biological part, which is, I think is so important to take into consideration when we're wondering like why we get diseases, how this occurs. And so we have to look at things, even for like adverse child experiences. This is really important to understand, perhaps that's contributed to a disease later on that you have in life. So that's what a gerontologist is.
And what is biohacking?
So biohacking is just like the word sounds. Bio meaning your biology, and hack, trying to find a shortcut or even just a way to change the system inside your body, very often using external factors, but of course internal factors as well. And what differentiates, say, a health enthusiast from a biohacker is that we like to test, measure, and assess, not just guess and take a supplement and go, I don't know, I don't feel anything, I don't know, measured anything. It doesn't mean gadgets, because that's some of the things we always think about. You're wearing Oura rings and wristbands and headbands, and that's just kind of, that's a little bit more advanced biohacking. But the foundation of biohacking is everything that you and I and a lot of listeners know already in terms of your nutrition and your movement, as well as your community and your sleep and stress and all of that. Getting that foundation is really important. And biohacking very often refers to a biohacker, and that's a person who is engaged in this kind of activities. And so what I do encourage women who are, I'm saying women, I say women because our podcast is all about women, but men and women, if you're listening to this, is to understand your own body, understand the biology, and take a moment to either write down on a piece of paper, or if you have the gadgets, look at them, and then decide if a protocol, whether it's a certain dietary change, or whether it's a new supplement, or if it's some meditation that you're doing or journaling, whatever it may be, is this working for you? And it's not just, well, I think it is, I don't know. It's spending a little bit more time looking into that. And what a biohacker tends to do is we do love to look at the science. We like to read research, but we know that it's never one size fits all. We know that it's just an N of one experiment, and the only person who matters in the room is you. And it doesn't matter if all the research says, great, HRT is fabulous for, the majority of women. If it's not working for you, well, it's not working for you, and that's okay. And you just got to move on to the next experiment. So that's
I
what we
like
like to
that.
do, is test, measure, and assess, and then have our own little internal experiments.
I love that. And everybody's so individual, right? So to me, what works for me doesn't work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. Like, and so that's something that's important. And I'm also a big fan of the N of one. And I like that definition because truthfully, I remember when I interviewed Natalie Nidham, and she's also a biohacker, and she was saying how we're all biohackers, similar to what you're saying, right? Like I would never really consider myself a biohacker, but in essence, I am one. So I thought that was such a cool thing to think of ourselves in that way. So as we age and go into perimenopause and menopause, both those things are happening at the same time. So
Yeah.
what's interesting for me, on what you do and as a gerontologist, is that what are some observations that you have seen that coincide, that happen as we're going into this next phase of our life?
It crosses a lot. And unfortunately, in my studies, I mean, when I went through my master's program of gerontology, it's one of the best universities in the country, around the world. And we didn't cover menopause more than probably 20 or 30 minutes. It was appalling. And
Not unusual. Not
I
unusual.
told them they had to change that,
Yeah.
because we want to know, is it menopause, or is this quote unquote normal aging?
Right.
And so there isn't enough research on that. And they do have a lot of crossover. And you can see by the fact that, well, let's say you're tired as you get older, and maybe it's the low NAD levels, maybe it's the hormones, but men also get tired. It's not just the women. It's we do have a lot of crossovers. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to tease out whether it's that, or even some, maybe you have Lyme disease or mold toxicity. Like, is it hormones, or is it that other
Yeah.
thing? So this is why you have to be a biohacker and try to tease out your own experiment, but not just accept, oh, this is normal aging, because
Mm.
there's what's common, getting tired is very common, but it's not normal to get so fatigued day in and day out. A little bit tired here and there is fine, but if you're really waking up super tired day in and day out and it's draining you, then there's something else that's going on. Could be hormones, it could be some other disease factor. So it's really hard. And I do think it's just a little bit of both. And so when
I
we
was gonna say, or it can be a combination.
Yes, it's a combination. And when I look at hormones or menopause and this community, and a lot of women may come to me and say, okay, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling moody or anxious. Is this menopause? And when I'll ask them, well, what's going on in your life? And they said, well, I just lost my job, or my boyfriend just left me, or I'm moving to a new country. I'm like, well, hormones or no hormones, this is distressful. And
Mhm.
anyone would feel that way. So when they said, yeah, but it's really hard this time. And I said, well, perhaps the loss of the hormones is making it more difficult. You're a little bit less
Mm.
resilient than you were before. So I always think
Sure.
it's just a combination. Very often it's a combination of those things. So that's just my opinion.
And when I think about, so a couple things to dissect there. So when I think about when we did our research on the symptoms, that's going to be published next month in December.
Which
that,
I quote all the time in every
oh,
podcast I'm interviewed in. And I refer to you. I love this research that you did on the symptoms. Sorry, just had to mention
oh,
that.
first of all, thank you. I so appreciate that. So, but what's interesting to me is I'll often hear, who cares how many symptoms there are? And that's the basis of our research is how many symptoms there are. And I always say, well, it's really important that we know how many symptoms because often we hear 34 recognized symptoms. So if someone comes to their doctor or healthcare provider outside of those 34, and I'm going to air quote this for those who are listening on our podcast and not watching it on YouTube, is that they might dismiss them. Now, we know, according to our doctor's visit surveys, that 40% of women are dismissed when they go to a healthcare provider and their doctor. So, knowing that there are 103 and not just the 34 is really important because then we validate how women are feeling. So, for me, quantifying it was really the basis of our foundational research. And I just feel that I mean, hopefully, like to your point, as it's not really taught. It's not taught in medical schools. It's not taught in schools. I'm hoping that things are going to change now with so many people who are out there advocating for this change and they will start learning about it so that they'll take women seriously, right? Or if someone comes to a healthcare practitioner and says, I'm exhausted. Well, I always talk about one of the first lines of defense is ask your doctor for a blood test, ask to check your thyroid, all 6 markers, ask to check your vitamin D, your B12, your ferritin, right? So as things are shifting and changing, as we go into perimenopause and menopause, so many things are happening at the same time. So like you said, just for the number one symptom, which is fatigue that you mentioned, it's like there could be over 30 reasons as to why we're tired, right? So let's try to peel away that onion and find out what are there any low-hanging fruit that we could change? Like, can we put you on some type of thyroid medication or maybe thyroid supplements, something that can help to support your thyroid if that is the reason, one of the reasons that's driving it. So I feel like I agree with you 1,000% that there could be lots of different things, but making sure that you're working with the right people, making sure you're getting the right information, all of that can be so helpful as you're navigating this time in your life.
And it's really hard to get the right information. One, because there's so much out there and it can be really confusing. I mean, anyone who's looking at menopause information is completely lost on this. This is what we're trying to do is help women navigate through that. And then
Yeah.
two, it's hard to find a doctor who specializes in menopause. They're not that many. And in the US, there are a lot more than the rest of the world. So if you think it's hard there, it's even harder in other parts of the world. And that's some of the struggles. And I think that women who are going through this transition now, it's great that we do have at least some information and we're starting to talk about it. But at the same time, because there's so much, I don't know, I think it's a political part, it's emotional when it comes to hormone therapy, that we're a bit lost and we don't really know what to do. And I don't think that there's enough I don't want to say enough evidence. There's plenty of evidence showing that it's great, but I think it's not enough for everyone to agree on and for doctors to really say, okay, this is great for you or not great for you. So you're still, whether you decide to take hormone therapy or not, it's a risk, whether you take it or you don't take it. Like we don't know what's going to happen. So it's a little bit the wild, wild west. I think for the next generation, it'll be a lot clearer what to do or what not to do. And this is why it's really hard and hard enough as we are in midlife, especially women who are seeing the changes. We are aging, whether it's menopause or not, and we feel a little older and but we're not really there yet. We're not young anymore, but we're not old anymore. So it's this struggle. Some of us are hanging on to the last bits of our youth, and some of them, just throw our hands up and say whatever it is, it is. And I think it's a freedom to be there. But I think this transition is really hard for us because we're neither here nor there.
Yeah, and if I think about myself, I mean, in my mind, so I'm 54, but in my mind, I'm still in my 30s. Like, I feel really young, right? Like that's kind of like mentally where I'm at. I'm like, wait a second. Like sometimes I'll look at my kids. I have a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and almost 14-year-old, and I'm like, when, how? Like I'm like it's like so like to me, I'm like, wait a second, I'm still so young, and I think that's an important message that you just mentioned for so many of us Gen Xers that and I'm sure all the generations, like, it's a hard thing to fathom. And then throw on top of that, this transition for a lot of women in perimenopause. I mean, for myself, I was in it for 14 years, 11 of which I didn't even know. So you have all of this flux and all of these things going on, and your bodies are changing and your moods and like what is happening. So that's why, and I agree with you. It's like, how do we just make it so much smoother for women to be able to navigate this time? And by the way, in my opinion, the number one way to do that is through education, because when we know what's happening, then we can make more informed choices as to what those treatment plans are, what those solutions are. And to your point that there aren't a lot yet, so there's more and more that are coming up. And if you go to the menopause.org, to the Menopause Society's website, they give you a list of certified menopause practitioners, and more are coming because at their annual conference this year in September that I attended with my posters, it was sold out for the first time ever. So it's nice to see that more and more practitioners and doctors or want to learn about it. But one of the things that's an issue as well, and this came from a very prominent doctor in the menopause space, told me that it came from actually two prominent doctors, one in Canada, one in the US. Both of them told me the same thing, that one of the major reasons that we don't have as many doctors as we'd like to is that it's hard to make money in the menopause space. And when I heard that, I mean, I just shook my head. I'm like, "What?" It's like it's an unfortunate reality, but I've heard it, like I said, from two very prominent doctors on both sides of in Canada and in the US.
Is it really though? I don't know. I think some people
I don't
are
know,
going
I'm
to
not a
figure
doctor.
out how to make the money from a menopausal woman. I mean, that's when you're talking about the industry itself, the menopause industry, there are people taking advantage. I think that there are a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say women are vulnerable. I think we're smarter than that, but we have to be really careful because they're preying on us. But if you're talking about a doctor and his practice or her practice, then yeah, yes and no. Because when I did the training through the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine, it was a doctor's training. And I just wanted to go through the program and listen, what are they teaching the doctors out there? And in fact, one of the things that came up, which I thought was really good, was that the doctors should warn their clients that, oh, great, we're going to give you hormone therapy, but you got to have 3, maybe even 4 or more sessions with us, because we have to make sure you're feeling good, that you get everything right. And then we want to test you to make sure that you're metabolizing everything well. And I would think, well, if I were a doctor, and this is again a private practice, not, if we're talking
Mm.
about, if you've got health insurance and you go to a private practice and these are very expensive, then yeah, well, I guess you could make a lot of money on a woman if you are actually getting so many times for her to come in. So again, how does that all work out? It can be very, very costly, and will insurance cover that is the other question. But, and then if you wanted to say, get her on some supplements, or I think there's many ways you could monetize that, because we're going to have to buy some of these things anyways if we want to have a smooth transition, or get it on a diet, or get on a exercise regime, or go to a gym. I don't know. I'm not a business person, but I can see maybe they could be if they wanted to.
So what's interesting as you're saying that is there is a bit of a stigma surrounded by anyone who wants to make money regarding it, right? So you have doctors who, let's say, sell supplements or sell courses or sell programs or whatever it is they sell, and then it's looked down upon by their peers perhaps, that it's like, oh, you're just trying to monetize. So I feel like there's a little bit of that struggle for everybody, right? That comes into play. Listen, I'm not a doctor, so it's not something that I'm very knowledgeable about. It's just things that I've heard and spoken to doctors about. So I think time will tell, right? As we do more and get more into it and allow doctors and physicians to be able to do certain things, obviously with respect. And like you said, like to believe in what they're doing and not just doing it to make a buck. Like all of those are important. And you hope that those are the people that you surround yourself with, or that you're privy to, or that you listen to, or whatever it is, or do your research about. All of that comes into play, and that you're working with honorable people. Now, not only doctors, it's anybody, right? So anybody who, like, I have a supplement line. I would hope that you would think I'm credible, and I'm doing it because I'm coming from a place of passion. And same for you. Like everybody has to make a living and has to live some way. It's the way you go about it, I believe.
Yeah. And that's actually, we did a great podcast with Celine Yeager on how to navigate some of this stuff and the information that we get, and find the right doctors, and who do you trust. It is really hard out there. And because sometimes if we're feeling really bad, we're really desperate, and we will spend money on anything just to feel better. But I think, like you said, the more you educate yourself, the better. And then put on your biohacker hat, like give it a little go. You don't have to, throw all your money and, put everything down the toilet, but you can take baby steps and experiment with different things or different types of doctors or whatever it is, depending on your resources. But there's a level for everybody out there.
And there's different solutions for everybody, right? Like you said before, like, maybe hormones is for you, maybe it's not for you, right? So that's why I like to say I focus on nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements, because I know that for the majority of us, like, we need to start with what we're eating. We can't just be taking, even if you're taking hormones and you're not looking at what you're eating or how you're moving or managing your stress, or even taking supplements to help supplement certain nutrients that we need, not replace, but supplement, because the foundation is always food. I mean, these are things that I believe are foundational for perimenopause and menopause. So I always say, let's start there. And there's room for everything, but always listen to your body. What works best for you? What doesn't? Is it feel right? Does it not? And that's a decision. Like if you choose to use hormones, that's a decision that you need to make that's best for your body with your healthcare practitioner. So I think I like this discussion, Zora. Like, I think it's an important conversation to be had. So let's move into the biohacking part. So I know that you wanted to discuss some ways that we can biohack our symptoms. So can you give us some examples?
Okay. Well, let's talk about the one thing I think is to understand biohacking, where I'm going to skip kind of the obvious stuff, the low hanging fruit, getting the right nutrition and exercise. I mean, because I think we know a lot of that stuff. So when I look at biohacking, I always say that it's like a pyramid. The foundation is the stuff that you talk about all the time. Most of it is free. We can get out in the sunlight. We can ground ourselves, get some good food, go to bed at night, get enough sleep. But the middle top tiers are things like perhaps supplements or some gadgets and tools that we can use. And then the top tier would be something you need a doctor for. So let's maybe talk about the middle tier, just not to be too repetitive, and give some people some tools that's other than things that they may know of already. So one thing I've been really engaged with in the last couple of years is Katsu bands, or blood flow restriction bands, which I think are something that people should explore if they're having trouble building muscle. And I don't like this word, weight loss or things like that, because I think that just sends people in the wrong direction. I think women going through menopause should really focus on strength
Mm.
and power and muscle mass. And the more we have that, the more we're able to handle our carbohydrates or
Blood
insulin
sugar
resistance.
regulation. Yep.
Yeah, if you're really struggling with that and you've tried everything, you just seem to not be able to do that. There are a lot of things that you can do, but one of them that a lot of people don't really know about is the blood flow restriction. And I've been using Katsu bands, I've been using blood flow, just general blood flow restriction bands for a while. And then I switched on over to Katsu, which is a different form, but generally it's kind of a glorified tourniquet. You think about it, you put it on a limb on your arms or your legs, and you exercise with them or you don't. And when I found about them, I read a lot of interesting research, and I listened to some podcasts about how it's really great for people who are injured. And I'm an athlete and I get injured and things happen to me. And there's times where I just can't train. And as a gerontologist, I was thinking, wow, this is an interesting technique for people who, I can't get my 85-year-old father-in-law to go and lift heavy. I mean, he's just not going to do it and he doesn't feel like it, but I can get him to slap on some Katsu bands, for example, and put around the house. And that will help him build the muscle. And so it's one of those things I've had my own little experiment with. I've been using the Katsu bands, which I feel safer recommending that more, because it was created for cardiac rehab patients, because if you use the traditional BFR bands, you really need to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, because there are contraindications if you have heart issues. The Katsu bands, I just feel safer in recommending those. And it has this gentle cyclical process where they inflate, the bands inflate for 30 seconds and then deflate for 5. And you hardly feel a thing, but it's actually activating growth hormone. And this is how this is building your muscle mass as well. And I've been using them since I haven't been able to do any impact exercises. I had osteoarthritis, and then I went through a hip surgery, and now it's like my muscle mass has maintained the same. And I'm able to speak about it now because I've been recommending and talking about it for a while, and I get feedback from other people. It's one thing if people go, oh, you're just an anomaly, it works for you. No, it works for everyone that I've recommended to who has gotten in touch with me and given me feedback. So Katsu is KAATSU. You can just look up that.com and just read about it, or just blood flow restriction, about blood flow. And there's so much research out there. There are a lot of other bands on the market. I haven't tested them out in terms of that are very similar to Katsu. So again, I'm not married to this one at all. I just have the most experience with it, but I think it's a wonderful hack for women who are struggling to build muscle mass, because it's not like you have to go to the gym and train really hard. Even if you had the blood flow restrictions bands on and you're lifting a baby weight, it feels like you're lifting a truck, because you're partially restricting the blood flow to your arms. And I could go on explaining a lot, but it's better to do your own research as well. And because I could talk about this forever, and I can I'm going to talk about a few other things as well.
No, I remember reading about the Katsu bands, and I remember thinking, they're more expensive, right? Like they're like
That's the problem.
$2,000 or something, like they're expensive. And I remember hearing about it and hearing some other experts talking about it, but I thought, well, it's expensive. But I like hearing that there are other options possibly that you could use that do similar things. So just so I understand, and for our listeners, so this is instead of going to the gym, or let's say if you're not mobile, or can you do both at the same time if you're able to go to the gym? Just break it down a little bit more so we understand fully.
So if you were to Google on YouTube, for example, blood flow restriction, you'll find 2 camps. You'll
Okay.
find the rehab people who are using it to rehab their patients, and then you have the bodybuilders. Bodybuilders are like the original biohackers. They've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah.
and you'll see they're trying to get more gains in less amount of time, or maybe with a smaller weight.
Okay.
And so yes, you can use them while you're training. If you use them with training, you'll have better gains rather than just puttering around the house. However, Katsu, I did this great interview with them on my podcast, and they said that they did all this research in terms of people who are sedentary using them, hardly doing anything, people who have moderate exercise, and then the pro athletes. And they were expecting the pro athletes to have way more gains than the people who were just, the other two groups of people. And actually, it wasn't that much more,
Wow.
not as much as they
That's
expected.
incredible.
Yeah. So in my own experimentation with it, I gain more muscle. I measure it through a body composition scale. I can see it if I'm actually using it with some rehab exercise, which is pretty much all I've been limited to be able to do with the Katsu bands. And then if I just put around the house or on my computer, then I have less gains, but I have gains, and that's
Wow.
pretty amazing. And
That's
so I've been
incredible.
really dependent on them. I just love them. And mostly because I get good feedback now, I've got a lot more confident. But you have options. Like you said, you don't have to spend $2,000 on these things. I've had gains with just the regular simple bands, but again, you just have to make sure you can safely use them, and talking with an expert who can explain how to do that.
No, I mean, listen, anything that's going to help build muscle is crucial, especially when it comes to like blood sugar regulation and insulin resistance. I mean, which we're so prone to now, and strength and longevity. I mean, the link between muscle mass and longevity and brain health. I mean, it's a non-option for us
Yeah.
at this point.
Absolutely. Now, and actually, have you ever interviewed Dr. Dale Bredesen?
I
He's
haven't yet. No,
okay.
he's a brain guy. I know exactly who he is.
Yes, he wrote the book, The End of Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's. Yeah.
He's very controversial, but he's had people he's helped through a protocol reverse the Alzheimer's, which is incredible. And I remember reading this book, and he started talking about katsu bands because it brings blood flow. And the arm bands, for example, as opposed to the leg bands, is bringing more blood flow towards the brain. And it's not the one protocol at all. It's just part of the whole program.
Mhm.
And so
Love that.
it's really good for the brain. And again, you can find all this stuff on PubMed, either just katsu and PubMed or just blood flow restriction. And you do a search and you'll see that. It's pretty amazing.
What are some other biohacks you have?
So one, I want to give a free biohack, and again, it's kind of goes back to maybe what we all know, but I want to reiterate how important it is to learn how to breathe. And we've all become over breathers, at least most of us. We're upper chest breathers, we're over breathers. And yes, you can breathe too much. And this is not what we want to be doing. I mean, you think about if you're hyperventilating because you're stressed out or you're having a panic attack, that's
Sure.
what I mean. But
Yeah.
also the fact that we're breathing through our mouths all the time when we're supposed to be through our nose. And I've gone through certification with the Oxygen Advantage, and that's one type of out of many types of breathwork certifications you can go through. They're not that it's the best or anything, it's just among many, and it's functional breathing. And so what I love to do is teach our community how to breathe through menopause. And it's because it's free. We just have to learn certain techniques, and then we can immediately lower our blood pressure, immediately lower cortisol, immediately. And you can see some of these things instantaneously if you're wearing something like an Oura ring. Your heart rate can come down, and this is just a matter of seconds, and it's incredible. And then you could feel more calm, more relaxed. And then you have a better utilization of oxygen. And if you have more oxygen going through your blood, well, then you're able to get more nutrients shuttled to the cells and to the tissues, and you just have better overall health knowing how to breathe. But it's for so many great things can happen when you learn how to breathe functionally. So you can YouTube this stuff. You can find out a lot about functional breathing and just practice. There's so many wonderful people out there teaching this. And again, it's breathing. If there's anything people can take away from now, is just breathe, become a nose breather. Your nose is meant to be breathing, not your mouth. Your mouth is for talking and eating and maybe a few other things. And your nose is made to filter the air, to get more nitric oxide into the body, which is a vasodilator. You'll be able to have more blood flow. You can feel it. My temperature rises every time I do a meditation with a breath work, and I'm sitting still. You'd think my temperature would go down, but I'm increasing the blood flow. And that's why the temperature goes up. You get a little bit more warm. And that's just one example of what wonderful biohacking technique. I mean, biohacking, but this is very ancestral, nothing new here, but biohackers love to use the breath work in order to control things that are inside the body, and it's free. Why wouldn't you want to learn how to do it?
I find that we forget to breathe, right? Like, it's one of those things that it is free, but many of us forget to do it, and so setting an alarm on your phone can help. Remembering to breathe. I'm an assistant coach on my daughter's rep basketball team, and what we do before games to help everybody relax is we do breathing. I'm the breathing coach, and we breathe in for 3 seconds, we breathe in 1 extra breath, and then we breathe out for 6 every single time. And what I love about it, and I could see this in real time, is they yawn. It so stimulates that parasympathetic part of their nervous system that they are yawning. And I'm like, and we kind of joke around about it. We're like, yeah, get the yawns out, everybody. Like, let's do that. So it helps them to relax. But I mean, I've seen it also, like, you could really see the impact it has breathing. And there's like you said, there's different forms. So find one that works for you. There are some breathing techniques that actually make me anxious and I can't do. So you have to find the right one that helps you. So Google it, like Zora's saying, or just breathe in deeply yourself and see how relaxed it makes you feel. So I love that. And like anything, there's different ways you could do it. So find the one that works for you.
There's a great app that I always recommend called Insight Timer, and they have a lot of breath work techniques there. You know, if you just 5 minutes, it doesn't take much. You could just here and there every 5 minutes, or like you said, put a timer on. But the Insight Timer is really it's free. Again, I love the free stuff, and you can get some great techniques. And I think more and more at least in the biohacking world, these gadgets and apps that we have for our rings or our Apple watches or whatever, they come with meditation or breath work sessions. There's always some little thing. I think more and more
Mhm.
people are starting to recognize the power of the breath.
I am a really big fan of wearables to the point though where it doesn't become obsessive because I do love to look at data and I love to look at what especially my sleep because I'll call myself a menopause sleep hacker because or biohacker because I really want to make sure I'm helping women and myself get that good night's sleep. And I see you're wearing the Ultra Human ring, which I'm really enjoying actually. So I've been enjoying it lately to look at the data and I like comparing different wearables as well. So I think they can be very handy, but it could be other things like an Apple Watch, like whatever it is that works for you that you have already can be a good way to measure certain things. So one thing we didn't talk about that I do want to kind of shift into is health span. And there's a lot of talk about health span these days, and people are saying, you know, there's lifespan and then there's health span, which is the amount of time that you're living in a healthy way, that you're not living in any type of sickness, you're living your life and you're feeling great and you have that energy. Talk a little bit how health span fits into your, you know, into gerontology and longevity.
Well, in gerontology, it's again, we didn't talk so much about health span. I was really, again, surprised. I was teaching them because they're just, at least this program that I went through is just really focused. Let's get people feeling better and healthier as well. But it wasn't like the focus. It still was kind of stuck on the lifespan thing. And that's
Mm.
where actually I find that I taught them a little bit. I learned a lot and I taught them other things too about menopause and health span. But health span is crucial to aging because we don't want just to live longer in a bad condition and sick and on 10 different meds. We have polypharmacy, which is killing us, and meaning we have so many types of
Polypharmacy.
medications. One, it's taking care of the other, and then the side effects of the other. And when you think about older adults, and if you are one of those who are starting to have difficulty remembering things, how are you supposed to remember all the different types of medication and the timing that you're supposed to take these? So it's really important we try to focus on getting our health span together so we don't rely on some of these medications and we can at least let some of this stuff go. But the health span is I think most people would agree I'd rather live a longer life, but in a very good condition. And what I'm always talk about is when I say about health span, it's generally around 50. We have health span until about the age of 50. And that's when we have diseases and we start taking medications or blood pressure things. And then we have another 20, 30, I don't know, 40 years with a lot of medications, with struggling and not having the quality of life, because it's the quality of life that's really important here. And that's what health span brings. So we're trying to shift, at least I'm trying to shift with our community, our health span as long as we possibly can, and then just have a very short period of disease and die very quickly and not have this long extended horrible life where we're just completely dependent on so many things. Because I think most people want independence. We don't want to be relying on others or on medications or other things. So that's where health span is something I think more and more people would. I don't think if they don't know about it already, they would agree this, yeah, let's live that kind of a life. And that should be the focus rather than, oh, let's, see how. I think modern medicine has gotten us pretty well in getting lifespan. It's just the health span. We got to figure that piece out. And there's so much that we can do as individuals. We don't need to wait for our doctor to tell us to do things. We can sort them out ourselves. And everything that you talk about in your podcast is these are the foundations. This is what's going to help people get a longer health span.
Hmm. It's yes, and, you know, hopefully not even get a disease and hopefully just live into your old age, and then when you pass away, you've done it in a way that you don't even have to end up getting some type of disease, right? And that really would be the key, and my hope for everybody who's listening here is that you live that life and that health span, and then eventually it's you don't have to experience anything like that. So, but unfortunately, but you're right. It's I like that term polypharmacy. It's interesting. I was just having that conversation with my mom the other day because she's 77 and she started taking blood pressure medication and she's having terrible side effects. And her doctor wanted to up her dosage, double her dosage, and completely disregarded the fact that she was having these terrible side effects, which only would lead her to taking other medication to help get rid of the side effects from, I mean, it's just, yeah. So it's just, I want to actually have her on my podcast to talk about her experience because it's been really interesting for her as a senior and who had no issues until a couple of months ago and now what she's going through. So
How
it's
old
a
is she now?
she's 77.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
very,
it's
very
hard for
common.
me to watch it too.
It's very hard to watch your parents age. And 70, it's, from 70 on, it's, at least in my experience, is that we see, so there's a big shift from your 60s to your 70s, and then another one from, I think around that mid 70s on is when disease starts to really hit and people really struggle with this. Suddenly you see your parents walking slower. Suddenly their mood is starting to change. And it's a difficult thing to watch, especially if you've seen your parents, if they've been active all their lives and quite energetic. And I think that there are a lot of solutions. There's things that we can do. And she's so lucky she has you, because at least you have some of the knowledge, but will she take it is another story too. A lot of people struggle with their own parents. They know what to do, but the parents will listen maybe sooner to somebody else than they will their own children. And, and that's a hard thing to do.
Actually, she did say to me yesterday, we went for a walk, and she did say she's very blessed to have me in her life. So
No.
she'll listen on a lot of things. And I mean, obviously, I'm not a doctor, right? So I could just provide a certain amount of information. But yeah, no, you're right. And sometimes they want to hear it from other people and not from their own family members. So it's a great conversation, Zora. And I think like I said, I think it's an important one to have. So before we end the conversation today, I love what you're doing on Instagram. And can you share a little bit about how you're looking at menopause through different ways and interviewing women about menopause in different countries that you're visiting?
So I'm a nomad, in case people don't know about that. And I travel in new countries all the time. And I take advantage of that by stopping women on the street and asking them 5 questions about menopause.
I love it.
And I get rejected a lot. You never see those.
Oh, really? What do they
Yes.
say when you get rejected?
It depends which culture. I think the say when in Asian cultures, I think the most open has been the Asian cultures, and that was a surprise to me. The most the when I get to Western European, if they say no, it's more like I'm shy and I'm yeah, I don't really want to talk about this, and certainly to a stranger. But when I get into some Eastern European countries, I find that a lot more challenging. And I would find that I'd have maybe 8 rejections for every 2 interviews. And in particular, where I was in Prague most recently, and I not only got rejected, which is fine, I'm used to that, but I felt that I was perhaps insulting them by asking them, because they would look at me and be like, no, and get out of my store, kind of a look, like just very offended. And happened once, happened twice. And I was like, wait a second, it's not just the woman, it could be the population as it is. And I'd ask some younger women what was going on. And they said, well, one, Czech women were very closed. And even if you went with a translator, you would have the same trouble. And 2, yeah, perhaps the fact that I approached them and said, menopause, would you like to talk to me about that? It's kind of like saying, hey, you're old, will you
Mm,
talk to me? They were
stigma.
taking it that way. And so it's a big stigma. I found it was probably the country that with the biggest stigma with menopause that I was not expecting at all.
Mm.
And so that's some of the differences in terms of being open to menopause or not. But what I do in other, so when we do get an interview, then I record it and we chop it up into a 1-minute reel. And that's what most people have patience for. And we throw it onto the social media. And those videos do so well. People so much enjoy hearing another woman's experience about menopause and what she's willing to share. And so that's, everybody can go check those out. They're really popular. And I just keep going and finding more women to interview.
I love that. And how could they find out about it? Like, how could they watch them? What's your Instagram account name?
Instagram is Hack My Age. HACK, my age. And
Love
you'll
that.
find that. You can also go to my website and you can find the Instagram handle there or any of the social media handles. We're all over the place, and YouTube as well. And yeah, they're really interesting. I have to say the ones that go most viral are the ones from the Philippines. And that's my guess is because I think the Philippines is a country where people really, really rely on Facebook because it's mostly Facebook where they go viral. And what just kills me though is that you'll have like 1 million views, you'll have thousands of comments, and they're struggling really hard with menopause. Even if it's a video where, a woman says, oh, well, I'm feeling pretty good. It's, a little bit here and there. You'll have women. And I find it really hard to digest because I can't help them all. And I'm trying to find ways to do this. And I've tried leaving a little video at the end, a 5-second video. Like if you need help, DM me. Again, my DMs just get hundreds of messages. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure out another system because I can't, it takes me a long time to get through this. So I'm looking for someone in the Philippines who's maybe a menopause expert. I've reached out to the Menopause Society there. They don't reply. And I can get a message out and help them. And what's interesting is that when I do message them and I say, hey, what are your symptoms? What's going on? When I ask them, hey, can you get to a doctor? And they say no. And I said, why? Is it because you're shy, or is it because you have no money, or what is it? And it's usually a cost thing. And so I'm trying to figure out now, is it because there's no social care there? Is it not included? Are these people living far away? And so I'm still struggling with that, but it really breaks my heart to see so many women in so much pain. And there are so many solutions. It's just they don't really know what to do. So that's the difficulty of doing these great videos, and then you feel helpless.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's, I hear you. And it's heartbreaking, especially
Yeah.
when you want to help so many women. And hopefully they are continuing to listen to your podcast and getting information from what's out there on social media. And hopefully they'll be helped. But if any of you are listening and you can help Zora find a contact in the Philippines, please reach out to her, because the more women we can help, the more we can help change lives. So it's really great work that you're doing, Zora. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we end the interview?
Well, I think the biggest message I can say is just like all these women who are watching these videos, education, and that's where I direct them to as well, is get educated, learn more and more about menopause, learn about your symptoms. I think your resource on your website with all these 103 symptoms is so valuable. And just being aware that perhaps a symptom you're feeling may be related to menopause. And then you can do things about this. You don't have to suffer in silence. And my motto is menopause is inevitable. I mean, we're all lucky to even get to this age and go through this, but suffering is optional.
Yeah.
And yeah, so again, educating yourself and putting into practice. I mean, there's the foundations that you always talk about as well. That's a given. I mean, we love hormone therapy, at least I do. And I think it's a great thing for a lot of women, but I always say you can't out hormone a bad diet and lifestyle. And you need to
Exactly.
still do that foundation. Particularly if you are concerned about your future self, which as a gerontologist, I'm always looking at us ourselves when we're in our 60s, 70s, and 80s. What will we be like? And I just don't think the hormones alone will be able to do as much power as perhaps both of them together.
Thank you so much, Zora, for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Zora. If you did, please share it, because when you share, it shows you care, and the more people we could reach. And if you could take a minute to please rate and review our podcast, I would be super grateful, because then we could help more women navigate perimenopause and menopause. Thank you for spending the last little bit with me. I know there's a lot you could be doing, but instead you chose to spend it with me. And for that, I'm grateful. I'll see you at the next podcast.